Good morning. So I'm Keah Schuenemann, and I'm from the Metropolitan State University of Denver, the second largest university in Colorado. It's an open enrollment school, so I get a big mix of students taking my courses. I'm a meteorology professor there, so I teach dynamic meteorology and synoptic. I'm sure dynamics was your favorite class ever. And I also teach this global climate change course that I developed with another professor a few years ago. So I'm going to tell you today about how it is important to make sure your students come away with the science concepts, but it is even more important that you kind of have this eye-opening experience for them and inspire them to really think globally. A lot of them live in their own little day-to-day bubble, and my goal is to have them get this global perspective on climate change. So the requirements fulfilled by the course, 2 requirements, which makes it nice and popular, fulfills the science requirement and also a global diversity requirement, which is a new sort of thing at our school that we just started a year ago. So we get a lot of students taking the course, and we're able to fill up all of our sections, and they want to learn about science as well, or they need to learn about science. I don't know that they want to. So we get a good student diversity. We have freshmen. I have a class of all freshmen called first-year success students, and they're mostly 18-year-olds, but I also have other sections of mixed ages, very different backgrounds of the students, kind of an urban population, and there's no prerequisite for the course, so it's mostly non-science majors, although I do appreciate the occasional science major in the class. And the largest class size is 35 students, but I do teach 4 classes at a time, 2 of this and 2 meteorology courses, so there's a lot that goes on in my life. So I have to be very organized, and one of the things that I do before the course is to really kind of do what Jen was talking about and figure out what do I really want them to come away with, and I build the course around that. And so I go through a series of lecture material that covers the science of global warming. So we go through what is science and what is the nature of science and the scientific method. And we talk a little bit about scientific literature, and we talk about Scientific American versus the New York Times versus your peer-reviewed journal articles. And we go through the basic science of global warming, the cryosphere, which is my personal favorite. And then they take a midterm on that. So they've established that they understand the science. And then we start moving into what is happening with global warming, what's going to happen in the future according to the climate models, what are the impacts of global warming, the mitigation and adaptation plans. And so they do a blogging project throughout the semester, and they create a series of pages and then some blogging posts throughout the semester. And then they also have to comment on their peers' blogs twice after each assignment, so they get to read about other countries. So we go to the computer lab at the beginning of the semester. Students pick a country, or they're assigned a country. I have to make sure certain countries are covered. And we set up a blog, and then they go through and create some graphs and blog throughout the semester. And I create some prompts for them to follow. So it's very specific that they're writing about what I want them to write about, but they, and I also am giving them the sources and things like that are reliable. And I also do this thing where I do in-class activities, which is my way of getting myself to shut up for a little bit during my lectures so that they're doing some active learning. So I create a worksheet every day for them to do, whether it's a lecture guide or a graph reading exercise or a critical reading exercise. I was telling some people how we used the Heartland Institute book that got sent to our university. I found 20 books in the recycling bin from my colleagues, and we used that as a critical reading exercise, so we had a lot of fun with that. The students, I introduced it later in the semester, so the students really enjoyed reading it and laughing about it, so they were at the level where they could do that. So the blogging project, every student is a country, and I have this front page where you can go and click on a country, and it will take you to a student's blog. So I just grabbed some screen captures of different blogs that students have created this last semester, and some of them put a little more effort into making it look a little more fun than others. And so the blogging idea is actually covered in the literature. It's called student-generated content, and there's some good evidence in the literature that this is a good idea. So it encourages deeper engagement with learning through the act of authoring, simply because of the awareness of audience. The audience is really just their peers in the class, although it is open to the public, so you never know who might run across their blog. The contemporary learner has therefore been described as a prosumer who has the ability to produce the knowledge that they consume. And I think that that's really a good part of today's world, the way that our students are with social media. So the blogging project itself, they create a series of background pages about me, climate, culture, and geography. And for the climate page, I create an Excel spreadsheet with a whole bunch of data from Denver and a bunch of different cities. And I noticed after I screen captured this and handed in my PowerPoint that the temperature in Copenhagen is probably not 50 degrees Celsius. So I may have chose a bad graph to grab for showing this. But anyways, they learn how to graph in Excel and put multiple lines on a graph, and usually this is their first time ever thinking about graphing or using Excel, so it's a fun project. They talk about the geography of their country, the culture of their country, and then their first blog post, not the background information, but an actual post, is on whose fault is it that we have climate change. So we go back to the computer lab. They create the Keeling curve as sort of just a way for them to understand how to take text data from the web and put it into an Excel spreadsheet and make a line, which is sometimes challenging. And then we also make this kind of graph that tells a really good story. We go to the Carbon Dioxide Information Center and we grab carbon dioxide emission data for all the countries in the world, and I just have them do like 6 different countries. So I grabbed Russia's image of this, and we have the United States fossil fuel emission, so this is actually carbon dioxide emissions throughout time in thousands of metric tons of carbon. And you can see the United States line, and then we have the USSR and Russia, and then China in red. And let's see, I think we have India down here, Italy, and Kenya. People always say, my Kenya line looks wrong. And I just say, no, they really don't emit that much CO2. So that's why it's pretty low. Okay, so then I lead them through a series of questions that they write their blog post about which country is responsible for climate change. Well, that's a complicated question. Are we talking about 2008? Maybe it's China. Are we talking about cumulatively? Well, if you add up all those numbers, which they learn how to sum things in Excel, they add up all the numbers and they find that the United States is 3 times more responsible than China for cumulative emissions from 1900 to 2008. And then they start to feel kind of guilty about this problem as an American. And then we talk about on a per person basis, whose fault is it that we have climate change, so a per capita basis. And it's really this first blogging post that gets them into this mindset for the rest of the course. So then they create a climate change impacts post. How is their country going to be impacted? Maybe it's already being impacted by climate change. I have a student always representing the Maldives in the class, and they talk about sea level rise there. And then how is your country going to adapt to climate change? We read the adaptation plans. And then how is your country trying to mitigate climate change? Or are they? Are they doing anything? And usually this comes back to what role are they playing in the Kyoto Protocol and what are they required to change? And then they comment on each other's blogs, and some blogs get more attention than others. I think it has to do with their buddies in the class. So this blog post had 4 different comments, and the students say things like, this is crazy, I can't believe that my student, or that my country is emitting so much. I'm pretty upset about the fact that my country is such a high polluter. So they get kind of involved in what their country is doing. So I took some questionnaire results. This fits in really well in this session, very similar to what the other presenters had done. I did a pre-course survey compared to a post-course survey, and I also compared my pre-course survey to the American population. And it's good to note, as I was reading about these other surveys, that if you survey people on a cold day or a cold week, you might get a little bit different results than if it was a really hot day. Yesterday, they broke the temperature record down in Denver by a degree. And, but that was not the case when I gave the post-course survey. It was cold in Denver. We set the all-time low record for May the night before, and it was snowing, and the whole month of May was really cold. And in April, we had 20 inches of snow in Denver, which is very unusual, and in Boulder, we had 60 inches of snow, which made it really fun for me to get to work every day. And we were very happy to have the snow, though, because this mountain in this picture right here was on fire last summer. So we were very excited about all the moisture. So just comparing the American population to my students as they enter the course. So how are they as far as being typical? There's a lot of numbers up here. The statistically significant differences are in blue, and I'm just going to highlight them. My students were a little less indifferent than Americans. They were more interested in learning about global warming, which is probably why they were taking a class on it. But it's good to know that they were interested. And they're a little less stubborn to change their minds. They're a little more open-minded, which is probably why they're students in general, but I really appreciated that this made them sort of the perfect population for receiving this assignment. I measured their willingness to take action in their own personal lives. Will you use reusable grocery bags and things like that? All of this wasn't very interesting because they were all very willing at the beginning of class. The only big difference was that they were willing to not use or not buy bottled water. And I think that I scared them with the BPA thing instead of climate change motivation there. But anyways, that's a good way to get people to stop doing it. So student perceptions of harm. The goal here was to get them to have this global view of climate change. And I have some before and after. So on the left is the pre-course survey, on the right is the post-course survey. And then a great deal of harm is in solid, and a moderate deal of harm is in the shades here. And I have you personally, your family, people in your community in the United States, in industrialized countries, and developing countries, plant and animal species, and future generations of people. And although all categories did increase, we find one really interesting result. So belief that people in developing countries would be harmed a great deal by global warming increased by 31% throughout the semester. And I think that this really shows that we achieved this goal of having them think globally. So some of them represented developing countries in their blogging project, and so they really came back to this idea, wow, these guys are going to be affected, and it isn't their fault, usually. So this is a good conclusion. So students were also asked at the end of their post-course survey just to make some remarks about what skills had they learned. They learned computer skills. They learned how to do research. They were so excited to be able to create a blog as opposed to writing a paper. And honestly, I was so much happier to be reading and grading blogs as opposed to papers. I've done papers in this class in the past, and they are mind-numbingly boring, and usually they're gibberish of Wikipedia articles reworded. And this was just fabulous. They're concise. You know, each post is about 4 paragraphs. There's awesome images that the students go around and find, and they include in their posts. And they always link back to their source, so you can go and see where this information came from. So it was so much better for me and for them. It really was fun, and they learned a lot of skills. So they also enjoyed it. This survey was for 70 students, and I only had one say that, oh, I just hate blogging, and I've always hated it. And all the other students were really positive about it. I'm surprised how many used the word enjoyable. So I really enjoyed blogging. It broke up the monotony of paper writing all of us have to do frequently through college, and was much easier to focus on and write due to the fact that it was just something new and different. So pretty exciting for them. And I should say that at the end of the semester, I had 97% of the students said global warming is happening. So as far as the knowledge survey stuff, it was just off the charts as far as improvement. And I had nobody saying that it was because of natural variability. Everybody had switched over to the greenhouse gas, the greenhouse effect. So the other commenting part was, did you really learn how to think about things as a global issue? So some great quotes. I feel like I paid these students to say these things, but this just came out of their quotes on this survey. I was forced to look outside my American bubble. Cool, that was my goal, all right. It helps spread awareness, and I think that what they meant by this is student awareness in the class, but also maybe other people are reading our blogs, and maybe those other people are becoming aware. So countries can adapt or mitigate, while other countries can't due to economic reasons. So these people are starting to understand that this is a big deal because not everybody's going to be okay in the end globally. It raised my awareness. It helped me focus on what needs to be done against climate change. It helped me put myself in other people's shoes in other countries. It made me want to learn more. That was the best one. I love that. And I have students all the time after this class come up to me and say, what do I do now? What class do I take? What do I major in? What do I do? And I don't always have the answer to that question, and we have to figure out what their skills are and see what they can do from there. But so instead of trying to lecture about it all, it was a good way for people to learn information. It helped me gain a different perspective. It allowed me to get a sense of the global picture. I like this last one. It made me realize how irresponsible the United States is in regards to carbon emissions in comparison to other countries. And that kind of brings me to my next idea here of my anecdotal evidence, just from chatting with these students throughout the semester, that They became really passionate about this issue. This is an image taken from our classroom in the first year success building, looking at the mountains, and there must have been a wind event that day, and you can see in the foreground there's actually a train of coal cars going by, and that train went by every day that we had class. I don't know how the schedule worked out that way, but every day the coal cars would go by, and we would look out the window and say, oh, look at all that coal that's going to be burned to turn on our lights, and it was a kind of a cool way of looking at things. But I want to tell you about one student. This is my last thought here. This is a first-year success student, an 18-year-old African-American student in my class, Keah. He was, showed up for class most of the time, and he's just really upset about climate change. He was upset that he didn't know about it before my class, and he was just very frustrated. And I'd like to read you a quote from what he said one day during class. So he says during a discussion, "This is not fair. Why are a bunch of old white men in Congress making bad decisions about my future when they won't even be around to see the consequences?" And I really thought that was interesting. And I don't know that Keah voted in the last election, and I think that might change for him in the future. So I hope that he'll become a little bit more active. So thank you.